the second half of our life, we are, we have less cognitive power. We have less physical energy. Our processing speed is slower. Our working memory is weaker. Our memories are shittier. And that's just reality. Our wisdom, though, can go up. And this is where a lot of people struggle, is they don't transition from the productivity mode of your 20s and 30s to, and then maybe when you hit 50 or so, this is when you should switch.
What is up, my friend, and welcome back to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Rice, coach to entrepreneurs, executives, and other high-performing professionals. Today, we have Dr. Chris Friesen back on the show. And if you're not familiar with Chris, if you haven't listened to his previous episodes, he's a licensed psychologist who's always been fascinated by what makes people successful. And he specializes in performance and also the neuropsychology of performance. So he's helped professional Olympic and up-and-coming athletes. He's also helped entrepreneurs, executives, academics, and writers. He helps them achieve their personal and professional best. And he helps them do it through understanding their biology, understanding their neurology, and understanding their psychology. So there's things that you need to know for you to make the path towards your goal smoother. So if you're feeling a bit derailed, or if you're feeling a bit self-sabotaged with what you're trying to achieve in your life right now, you're going to get a lot out of this episode. It is for you. So without further ado, let's step into this conversation with Dr. Chris Friesen. Hey, what's up, Chris? Thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's been a long while.
Yeah, sure has. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I already talked about your intro in the beginning of the podcast, and you've been on the show a few times. And I would just, first of all, like to catch up with you. What's exciting? What's new and exciting in your world right now?
Yeah, good question. Right now, I'm spending a lot of my time working on a new YouTube channel where I'm basically trying to distill the stuff I tell my clients. This kind of started during COVID, where people, weren't coming into the office, and we basically moved to virtual. And I realized, a lot of clients wanted to, continue. And I thought, one way to do this is I'm going to make some videos to go over the things I usually talk to clients about, so they can watch them. And of course, the goal is also to bring it to a wider audience. So making YouTube videos is now a thing I've been spending a lot of time on.
Cool. Yeah. And we'll talk about this later, but if you're interested in checking out Chris's YouTube channel, you got to go to Friesen Performance with Dr. Chris Friesen. So if you look up Friesen Performance on YouTube, or Chris Friesen, and that's Friesen, I'm sure that'll come up, as well as we'll have the link to your YouTube in the show notes, of course. But those are for those of you who already know who Chris is. Now, I know some of you are probably new, because we have new listeners coming in all the time. And you're probably, well, who is this guy? Like, what are the goods? And I would ask you, Chris, like, in this, I don't know how you feel personally about you working with your clients, but I have two types of clients with how I work with our body transformation program. And I help people with two basic things. I could even throw in a third one, but strategies and stress. And the people who just need strategies, they just needed the strategies. And I have clients like that, and they kill it. But then there's the clients who are dealing more with stress, and that becomes a more in-depth, that it takes longer to solve. There's plateaus in regards to fat loss, because if you can't handle that, the stress you're under, it drives, certain behaviors, usually eating and or drinking alcohol. And I would ask you, what are some of the things that you're finding your clients challenged by right now, and how are you helping them?
Yeah, great question. Stress is a big one, of course, like you're saying. Motivation is a big issue for some people, getting themselves to do things they don't feel like doing. This is what we call self-discipline, which I like to differentiate between impulsivity, which is more of a emotional issue, which is a hard time stopping yourself from doing things you shouldn't do. So Impulsivity is more emotions in the sense that we engage in impulsive behaviors, let's say overeating, binge watching, overspending, Amazon shopping, this kind of stuff, gambling, drug use, all these things, pornography. We do these things because A, they reduce negative emotionality, uncomfortable feelings, and B, we have a hard time resisting doing them because it gives us uncomfortable feelings. The resisting or pushing the plate away, so to say, is difficult. And you have to be able to tolerate the distress of doing that. So these two things, along with self-discipline, in terms of personality, they actually load on different factors. Self-discipline loads more on conscientiousness. In my book, I call that motivation and self-control. And impulsivity lands more on neuroticism, or what I call susceptibility to negative emotions and stress. And this is a big issue for a lot of people these days, that and stress. I think those are the biggest issues. And it has to do with our society, with technology, and how busy we are and things like this.
Yeah. So I think the first important distinction there, and I remember this when I was working with you and some of our past conversations, when it's important to understand that impulsivity, it falls on the neuroticism factor of our personality, which is indicative of, it's like a different brain area. Is that true to say?
Yes. It's, when we do research, you can look at this in a more global way. There are cross correlations between impulsivity and self-discipline. And some people call that impulsivity in general or disconstraint. But when we break it down, they do cross-correlate, but they're more correlated with their parent scale, which is neuroticism, which is basically you take all these studies, and when you get all these traits that go together, they have to come up with a name. So it's called factor analysis, which is a statistical technique to figure out what things tend to go together. It's a bunch of correlations, but with lots of data. And once you figure that out, you look at, these are all these items or these traits. What is the commonality behind this? What could we call this? And it loads more on that global trait of neuroticism, which is impulsivity falls under that, whereas self-discipline is more conscientiousness, which has other traits like how long you take to make decisions, called deliberation, how much of an achievement striver you are, how much of a sense of competence you have. Those are some, and also how reliable you are as well. So those are also, I think those tend to go together. And they're difficult for a lot of people. And I think it's causing a huge amount of problems when it comes to fitness and health, getting themselves to go to bed early, people getting themselves to eat the right foods, stop eating the wrong foods, stop watching television so you can go to bed, right? For example, or watching YouTube or Netflix or whatever it may be. These are big. And it's interesting, since I saw you last, I'm a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist still by license and training. And so the number one referral source for clinical issues is adults who think they have ADHD. So that is the number one thing we see these days. I probably do 3 or 4 a week where we do these really in-depth assessments. We do brain scanning like quantitative EEGs to help confirm the diagnosis. But a lot of the time, the vast majority of the people I see, I tell them in the end, this is not ADHD, because ADHD is actually an under-arousal problem. The brain is underactivated. And it's about 85% of people with ADHD have excessive slow waves in the brain. And brain waves, by the way, are very stable. So when you measure people 10 years apart, they're basically identical. Unless you have brain trauma or do serious meditation or neurofeedback or you're on medications or smoking too much weed, these can change your brain. But when we see them, they're all convinced they have ADHD and they just were missed as kids. But we do brain scans, plus I look at their educational records, and I ask them to fill out their perception of how they were as a kid, looking at, these are national normed scales, and have someone who knows them well, like usually a parent, rate them when they were a kid. And most of them didn't have it as a kid, but ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. You don't develop it as an adult. Almost always, they have the opposite profile. Their brains are overactivated, and so they have this fast wave profile. Some people in my field will diagnose ADHD in those situations. On the surface, it could look like ADHD, but really ADHD, what we think of it is more of this slow wave under arousal. This is why you prescribe stimulant medications. That's why it makes no sense. Why would you give a hyper kid stimulants, slow release amphetamines? Why would you give that as a treatment? It's because their brains are understimulated, and therefore they need to be basically, they can't control their behavior. And they're also self-stimulating by moving and doing things to help activate their brains into a more normal range. And this is why medications, which are stimulants, help with ADHD. But these adults that come in, it's the opposite. They have excessive fast, so which is basically anxiety and neuroticism. And this, you can have both, of course, but most of them, that's what it is. I say, look, if I tell you you have ADHD and you go to your doctor, they're going to prescribe a stimulant, Concerta or Ritalin. These are the first line treatments. And what will happen is you're going to get much worse. Your appetite's going to drop. You're going to basically have stomach aches potentially. You're going to have a hard time sleeping, and your anxiety and irritability is going to potentially go through the roof. And so the issue is not ADHD. The issue is excessive overarousal of the brain. In my sleep videos on YouTube, I go over one of the main causes of poor sleep, which I call physiological overactivation, which is exactly the same thing, being physically overactivated in the evenings. So that's kind of a long answer, but this is something kind of new since I saw you last time. That's a huge part of my practice now is adults. I do kids as well now, but adults who think they have ADHD, and we measure personality, brainwaves, psychophysiological stress profiles, and we give them this really detailed information about what they can do and what's the real problem.
Yeah, super important, because I've even casually said, oh yeah, I probably, I'm like a little ADHD. But in reality, I've never been tested. I've never been told that I have that. And and there's a very good, like I do better when I meditate and calm myself down, and then I feel more productive, focused, etc.
Yes, exactly.
And that, that kind of, to your point, although anecdotally, it's like, well, I'm slowing myself down, right? I don't necessarily feel better when I drink coffee. I got to be a little bit's okay, but I can get overstimulated. So what I'm hearing is you really need to, if you've ever, and not you, Chris, but if you're listening right now and you've ever been diagnosed with that, you might want to make sure that the person who did that you didn't just say, yeah, I feel like a little hard to focus. Oh yeah, you got some ADHD, and someone gives you a script for Ritalin. Make sure that you're getting the proper testing, I would say, because I've even had clients who told me that, and I just didn't ask how they were diagnosed or whatever. But that's something super important. But let's dive into the question that's on everyone's minds after, your very thorough answer. How much weed is too much weed? And I'm just kidding there. Let's not talk about that. If you're smoking weed, regularly. Anyway, but the question I have is that, what's in your view, or at least the story with your client, what you're seeing with your patients, what's leading to this overstimulation? What are the behaviors, the environment, et cetera? Or, if you want to break it down to people's physiology, their genes even, what's causing this overstimulation that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of levels to this. One is more of a surface level, is the influx of referrals, which are all self-referred. People look me up on the internet, and I get people all across the province of Ontario. We're not allowed to technically diagnose across borders here. And I couldn't diagnose an American, someone across the border. But when COVID hit and a lot of people had to work from home, all the structure was removed. And so they are basically having difficulty coping and organizing themselves. It's taxing on our executive functions, which is our ability to plan, organize, inhibit. This is more of a neuropsychological concept that's similar to conscientiousness in the personality literature. And so that's one of the things. And of course, when people are, especially extroverts, when they're taken away, or even people who are highly agreeable, and you're not getting a lot of social contact or ability to help people. Agreeable people are more likely to want to help and be altruistic. Extroversion is more about external stimulation. And those people struggle a lot. And so therefore anxiety comes out. But to go a step back, all of this, like every mental health problem, except for psychopathy, psychopaths, not sociopaths. You hear this all the time. Sociopaths is the assumption that these people are learned to be psychopaths. That's bullshit. Excuse my language. But psychopathy is it's highly genetic, about 0.6, 0.7 out of 1.0. And it's highly to do with personality traits. And then your environment can determine basically whether you're, you rob people or you're just a corporate psychopath. But our personalities in general are about 50%, 50 to 60% genetic. And everyone who comes in with mental health issues is high on the personality dimension of negative affect or neuroticism. They're all the same thing, what I call susceptibility to negative emotions and stress. That is the underlying thing that is shared with all people coming with anxiety problems and depression problems, pretty much like 98% of them. And it's interesting. What's happened, actually, my PhD dissertation was on this exact topic, is we've learned what the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, has getting fatter and fatter as time goes on, as they add more and more diagnoses. They're like fine chopping, trying to carve nature at its joints, and it's not really working.
What do you mean by that?
So basically what they're trying to do is diagnose more and more problems. So like, I can't remember how many, let's say there was 40 years ago or 20, 30 years ago, there was maybe 5 anxiety disorders. Now there's like 25. And so it's like now specific phobia and agoraphobia and generalized anxiety disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. In the future, there'll be complex PTSD as well, things like this. And what's happening is they're trying to develop treatments, for example, medications, and psychotherapies specific to each disorder. And what we're realizing is that all this is personality, in the sense of all these people who come in for mental health problems are high on negative emotionality. Of course, half of the population is high on, let's call it neuroticism for now, neuroticism, myself included. And basically, the vast majority of people that are high on neuroticism do not have diagnosable mental disorders, but it's almost like a prerequisite to have it. And so what's happening is there are all these underlying mechanisms. So, which is partly genetics. And then you take another step up. For example, brain scanning, quantitative EEG, we can see excessive fast wave activity, like off the charts, 2 or 3 standard deviations or 4 or 5. So 98 percentile or higher. So higher than 98% of people in the general population. So lots and lots of fast wave activity. So you can see it in that sense. We do psychophysiological stress testing, and we give you these. I did this with the high-risk officers for one of the major police services here for about 3 years. And we test in a standardized way their stress response. Because they'd all tell me, because I had to check in on them every year. They say, like the SWAT team guys would say, no, I'm fine. I don't have any anxiety or stress. I'm good. And I said, well, let's do some testing and we'll find out. Because there is a bit of a macho, persona behind this.
Yeah, you just handle it, right?
Exactly. And then we give these tests where we measure in a standardized way. We give them these different stressors. So these are, I won't give them all away because people could listen to this, but basically they're more like cognitive stressors or loud noises, things like this that you have to do, or you have to do some math out loud with the examiner in the room and correcting you every time you're wrong, and to try and elicit a stress response. So we're measuring their sweat response, their temperature in their fingers, their muscle tension in their forehead and in their traps. We're measuring heart rate variability, heart rate. I think we have an EEG on as well. We're measuring their brainwaves. And we're going to see what happens when you're just sitting there at the beginning of the test, what happens with each of the 7 or 8 stressors, and what happens when you rest in between each of those stressors. And what we see is this basically difficulties regulating the stress response. But people are a little bit different. So a lot of people have the sweat response issue. So in other words, we see in graphs, and I show it to them. Here you are at the beginning of the test, you're down here, and then the stressor happens, and it's supposed to go up during a stressor. It's normal. It means you're making an effort. The sympathetic nervous system is activated. And now you're resting. We'd like it to come back down to where it was at the beginning of the test. But it's not. It's still up there. The next stressor goes up again. And then during the rest period, it's still up. And it goes up again. It's like a staircase going up. And I say, look, this is, you don't notice this, but this is going on underneath the surface. Your body is not able to let go. The gas pedal is stuck. Once you have a stressor, it's building. The sympathetic nervous system is activated and getting more activated and not relaxing. You're not able to let go or take your foot off the gas pedal. One way, just to jump over here, one way to do that, to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, digest, relaxation response, which are 2 parts of the system, of the nervous system. One is sympathetic, which is stress and fight or flight, like everyone knows. But the parasympathetic is the opposite. It's rest, digest, the anabolic system. And one way we know to do this is that 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out breathing, and that's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Our heart rate will increase as we breathe in and decrease as we breathe out. It's been shown to reduce blood pressure. It's been shown to increase decision-making. It's been shown to improve sleep. Actually, my second latest video that just came out is on how to do this for sleep, to reduce physiological activation. And what else? Of course, PTSD. There is a meta-analysis in the journal, I think it's Nature or Science, whichever one. They're the top journals in the entire world, on heart rate variability biofeedback, which is at 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out breathing with feedback from a computer, being really helpful with depressed patients. So this is huge.
What a software would that be? Or what's something that, a feedback that someone could use to, because I'm like, I hear that and I'm like, I do meditation, I do deep breathing exercises, but I would love to just test with some type of feedback as well.
Yeah, 100%. So there's two things. There's a friend of mine, Dr. Jay Wiles, used to have the Mind Hacker Radio. He used to be the co-host of Ben Greenfield's podcast. He's a health psychologist down in.
We won't hold that against him too much.
Yeah. So in other words, he doesn't know shit because he's a psychologist. No, I'm kidding. And he, or maybe you're talking about Greenfield.
Yeah, it's a Greenfield. No. Anyway, keep it moving.
Yeah. He's got a new product. It's from Hanu Health, HANU. And he's teamed up with, I forget his name now, but he's the guy from the Oxygen Advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Not James Nestor, but the other guy he's either Irish or Scottish. I'm forgetting his name. I want to call him McIntyre, but I'm sure that's not the right name. But he has a new device that was supposed to work on the wrist, but the latest thing, it's going to be a Polar H10 chest strap, I believe. But there are other devices, but the ones I recommend at this point, that has not been released yet. It's going to be released soon. The ones that I use and recommend to my clients is HeartMath's Inner Balance, which is usually about $150 US. And they have a Bluetooth and a lightning sensor. That one is good. It measures, it's slightly gamified, so it's pretty useful. And it works on your phones. So that's pretty much great. The other option is Thought Technology, which is, these guys are the pioneers in biofeedback, especially equipment, and also neurofeedback. They're in Montreal. And, if you look back at pictures of astronauts when they're training, let's say in the pools, they have their spacesuits on, and there's pictures of them like without the spacesuits. They have all these wires connected to them, and that's Thought Technologies equipment. That's the same equipment I use when I do biofeedback, when we do the stress testing. And this costs thousands of dollars, and you have to be some sort of health professional, I believe, to buy it. That's way overkill, but they have a new product, which is a Bluetooth sensor. I briefly mentioned it in one of my videos on sleep. It's called EVU, EVU, and it measures three things: heart rate variability, not as like an Oura ring. It doesn't measure it like this, but it measures training. So you're doing the breathing, and it basically scores it from 0 to 100, or you can look at the raw score. And you do the 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out breathing. And what you do is you try and get your score near 100. But you flip the screen, and the same sensor is also measuring your sweat response as well. And you can flip the screen again, and you get temperature response. So sweat response is ultra sensitive. So if you think of a negative thought, your sweat glands will activate on your finger within 1 to 3 seconds. If temperature can take 1 or 2 minutes to change, it's much harder to change. And it's interesting because both sweat and temperature, to get them to come down, you have to take your foot off the gas pedal. You have to stop trying and just observe. So this is huge because I talk about this in my sleep videos, because it's super important with physiological activation that you have to let go and allow sleep to happen. But it's the same with peak performance. And I have a video on this where athletes often come to me and say, look, I'm feeling anxious at the I have Olympic trials coming up. I want you to teach me, hey, doc, help me feel no anxiety. And like I say in my video, the problem is not that you have anxiety going into the Olympic trials or at the Olympic trials. The problem is you think it's humanly possible not to feel anxious in those scenarios.
Right.
And basically, the best way people learn is through experience. We call it experiential learning, as opposed to me just telling them. And so this is one of the main logical reasons I decided to make these videos, because I needed to show people basically what happens. So, because I couldn't see people in person. So I hooked them up to a GSR, which is a galvanic skin response, which is the sweat response on our fingers. And there's a line graph on the screen going like this. It's live. And I say, look, this is called biofeedback. I said, look, when this line goes up, that means your stress response, your sympathetic nervous system is being activated. When it goes down, it means it's not being activated, like your foot's off the gas pedal. And I say, do what you normally do, make this line go down. And invariably, it goes up and up. Right. Exactly. And then it's only when I say, okay, this is the problem. I need you to stop trying. Yeah. Stop trying to control your stress. Stop trying to control or make yourself sleep. It doesn't work like that. Let go and allow this line to come down. And not everyone gets it all at first. Some people they're just designed to go and do. And even using the words make it go down or try are the wrong words. The words you need to use are allow.
Stop trying. Go down. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Allow myself to fall asleep. Allow the stress to come down. And it's usually an aha moment when they feel this or see this. I had a guy who was a high-level pool player who I worked with for a while. Great guy. And he basically was trying to figure out like how to be not so stressed, because the more you're stressed, the more your muscles are tense and pools a lot of fine motor movement. And basically, once I did the same thing with him, and he just was blown away. He's like, "This is, oh my gosh! And now I get what I was doing wrong. I was trying to control it, like trying hard to relax, and I just had to let go, and I didn't know how to let go. Now the system shows me, oh, I'm letting go. Oh, now I'm trying, and now I'm letting go." And this is the miracle of this. So going back, the EVU is the newest ones that came out now work on iPhones. They didn't work on iPhones, only Androids before, but the ones that they're selling now work on iPhones. EVU from Thought Technology. I think it's thoughttechnology.com. And I have no affiliate links or something for them. I just happen to use them. And the other one that's specific to heart rate variability is HeartMath's Inner Balance. Those are the best consumer grade ones that I'm aware of that are easy to use and that do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, great toys to look up and some food for thought about how we're dealing with our stress. You know, it's interesting when we're having this conversation, a couple of things. I think the first is I think about some of my clients who I get into arguments about stress all the time. Actually, they might, cause my stress to actually go up sometimes, some of these discussions, because people, a mentor, I'll start like this, a mentor of mine who's helping me with marketing. So he was like, "Ted, people have no idea that there's a connection between stress and health. It's just not something people understand. Health is about exercising. It's about food. Now people are talking about sleep, but it's not something that people understand as even, and for me, health is a 100% looked at through the through the stress perspective. You overstress your body, you don't recover from your workouts. If you overstress with exercise, it doesn't cause adaptation. Well, it causes a degradation of your fitness, not an improvement of your fitness. If it's like all about stress and the application of it and the management of it and how it all goes together. And what you're talking, and then what you're talking about is, it also brings up some of the stories I've had with executives. One, Damon, a shout out to you if you're listening, and hopefully this is shedding some light on this situation. Because stress is a bad thing. That means like, oh, I'm so stressed, someone cut me off in traffic, and then my tire blew out, and then I was late to a meeting, and I lost a deal, and it's all this. That's what stress is. But we don't understand like stress is anything that causes a stress response. If we could, right. It's like, technically, you right? It doesn't matter what it is. You could be watching, a viral video on Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or whatever, and your stress is going up and it's contributing to that stress load, that allostatic load, right? Yeah. And so, And just to bring it back to my client, Damon, he was like, man, things are going really well. His business was expanding and it's a good thing. He's not hurting financially or things are going in the opposite direction. They're going well. But he was like, man, and he kind of felt bad about it because he was like, he almost felt bad about saying like, like we have this feeling like people are struggling out there. Why am I stressed that my business is growing and that I'm doing so well financially? But the reality is that's still stress, isn't it? Can you talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions that some of your clients or some people have about stress and how to better identify it when we're under stress instead of just saying, for us, it's about this story. Like, is this a bad thing? Then no, then it's not stress, even though like I can't turn my mind off and I'm having trouble sleeping at night. And right. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It goes two ways. Like you're saying, some people don't think they have any stress. Like some of these police, a lot of high achievers are like that. They think this isn't stress. And then there's people who are, pretty stressed. And of course, the higher you are on that personality dimension of negative emotionality or susceptibility to negative emotions and stress, the more, more vulnerable and the more reactive you'll be. And so the other thing is, without stress, without bad times, without tough times, there are no good times. I call this a law of contrasting. And the law of contrasting is this: when you eat, it works from a cellular level all the way to a global psychological level. So this is when you eat, if you have chocolate and then you try to drink orange juice after. What does the orange juice taste like after you have chocolate?
I don't think I do that. I don't drink much juice, but just from my recollection of not good. Bitter.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, it'll taste bitter. You won't taste the sweetness because the sensory neurons on your tongue for sweetness are saturated. And so it's basically relative. And I also say this works on a productivity, and I work with a lot of people who have issues with this. It's that you end up with, I have people coming to me over the pandemic when the kids were in virtual school and say, look, my little Johnny, he won't sit down, or he's not paying attention, or he's throwing a fit when he has to, at 9:00 when he has to sit down for virtual school, or at 8:30 for virtual school. I said, well, what's Johnny doing between the time he gets up at 7:00 and when his school starts? Well, she kind of walks me through and he's like playing his Xbox or PS10 or whatever it is up to now, right? Aha.
37.
So it's like it's like you're feeding him ice cream and saying, Johnny, you finished your ice cream. Now it's time for your plain broccoli. And he's going to be like, this tastes like absolute shit.
Right.
And so the brain works like that. And this is how you're productive during the day. You do the hardest, most boring things first in the day, and you get those out of the way. And then everything else in the afternoon or later in the week, for example, you do the more fun things. And this will maintain motivation. But, going back to the anxiety example, we have to be careful because it's all relative. So you have to feel down stressful times in order to appreciate the calm times.
Now, is that just a philosophical thing you're saying, or is that like some... No. Can you talk about that a little bit then?
Yeah, philosophers, of course, are the ones that first talked about this. But we know, just like I was saying, in this neurological level, this is how it works. And on a psychological level, is this contrasting? So, what we need to be aware of is if you try to live your life never feeling stress, never feeling anxious, avoiding anything that makes you uncomfortable, well, first of all, your body will just recalibrate. Your brain's going to recalibrate. So whatever was the most stressful thing, like the mailman or mail delivery person, they put the wrong mail in your mailbox, or you're waiting to get something in the mail and it didn't come. That's going to be the most stressful thing for you that day because your life is so lacking in stress. But for other stresses, so your brain just recalibrates to prioritize or categorize what's the most stressful thing and what's the least stressful thing. And the most stressful thing will cause a pretty good spike in the adrenaline and in the sympathetic arousal, this stress response. And so we do need to have stressful times to feel and appreciate the less stressful times. But of course, you can just go pedal to the metal, like you're describing this fella here, where, we start to define success as, let's say income or the size of your business or the number of clients you have, this kind of thing. And of course, what ends up happening is with that comes more responsibility, more stresses, and that can make you unhappy. Lots of people come to me and say, look, I'm rich. I'm sure exactly like you, but I don't feel happy. Of course, there's a myth that we're going to feel happy. Happiness is, no one should strive to be happy. You should strive to be satisfied with your life and living a life that you find meaningful, because happiness is a fleeting state in terms of what people think, this hedonic feeling of joy. You watch every Instagram video. People aren't taking videos of themselves when they're, constipated. They're taking videos of themselves when, things are going really well. I'm at the beach, I'm feeling amazing. I just came back from a run, that looks great. And that is great. But you're not seeing the other, 90% of their day, which was a bit of a grind. And so we see that and think, well, that person looks happy. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I need to be happier because I'm not smiling and laughing and feeling like I'm on top of the world all the time. Like it seems like everyone else is. And we know this logically. We know we're not stupid. We know that people are only taking pictures of themselves or videoing themselves when things are going well. But it doesn't matter. Experientially, emotionally, we're still thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't feel as happy as I think I should be because everyone else seems to be quite, happy and doing so well. Like my Facebook, I take pictures only on good occasions. And I got a new car. It's like, well, the car is like 4 years old now, right? But it looks like someone's like, well, Chris is doing well, but it's all because of this. It's optics. It's not on purpose either. Nobody wants a downer. No one wants to say, this is reality. This is me. It's trying to get out of bed. I hate this day. I don't want to get up. No one takes hopefully a video of that. But we see this and we get this warped perception of what does it mean to be happy? So I know with my career, I've had lots of options or opportunities to expand, get bigger, take on more clients, work for certain people or groups or organizations or teams. And for the most part, I turn it all down because I finally realized at 46 that that's not really how I define happiness. I have a child, 10-year-old, and a wife and a house, and I want to just be stimulated. I know enough to know that if I take on that stuff, yes, sure, I'm going to look really even more successful on the outside, but I'm not going to be happy. I'm using the word happy, just like I was saying not to, but I'm not going to be content because taking all that on paper, I look more successful, but I'm actually draining myself, my stress response. I'm running around on adrenaline and trying to keep up base to base, never being fully present. And just the more money, more problems, they say, right? Like this is kind of the idea. So I think we got to be really, really careful about what we shoot for. Like when you see people winning the gold medals, yeah, it looks all glorious. And you see some documentary on, the UFC fighters, and still looks kind of glorious, even though it looks tough. But, it's one thing to watch it on TV. It's another thing to live it. It may not be the best goal for most people is to do that. It's not a quote unquote normal person that becomes a UFC champion. It's not a quote unquote normal person that becomes Elon Musk, right? It's not, Bill Gates isn't a normal person. There is a lot of stress and pressure and a lot of sacrifices to be that successful. And we got to be careful. You have to know what you're getting into. And I think that's important for people to think about.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm in the place where we're growing our business and it's very easy to chase an income goal. And certainly, I don't have any issues with wanting to make money. I think money is great. It can give me the resources to work with you or other coaches. But at the same time, I see okay, well, there's people who, and I've seen this when I was training clients back in my Miami Beach personal training days, working with very high net worth, what most people would consider at least very high net worth individuals, $50 million, $100 million net worth people, Ferrari collections. You saw that there were some who were happy for sure. And happiness or contentness, as you say, didn't come from necessarily the money, right? Maybe partly, but it was from, friendships, the family, other things, freedom of their time, doing what they really wanted to be doing, a sense of purpose. And the ones who just chased the dollars, I mean, they were overweight, alcoholics, sometimes drug addicts, the relationships with, in this case, it was men, their relationships with women were a mess. It was a transactional, let's say. And so I saw that. I was like, well, money isn't the thing. It certainly makes you happy. And I guess if you want to buy into the research that we have, up to like 70,000 USD per year. And, but past a certain point, you need to have the other areas handled. And if what I hear you saying and what I'm being mindful of too, it's like I actually had a couple weeks recently, just 1 week, a couple weeks ago, where I was just like, fuck my business. Not my clients. I love coaching clients, but the growing the business, training my employees, and putting together the content strategy across platform. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Fuck all that. And I had to think okay, what am I doing? What am I working for? And yeah, it's important. It's a question everyone needs to ask themselves, because if you start chasing that someone else's idea of success, or maybe what you think might make you feel good instead of what actually makes you feel good, you can end up in a place that you kind of regret getting to. I would ask you,
culture. Yeah.
What's that?
The hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
You got to be careful, right? Also, guys like you and I, we've passed the peak, or we're at the peak. It depends where physical peak is past, but the cognitive peak is now starting to slip. no matter what we do, unless we become super agers. I'm trying my hardest to be a super ager in terms of cognitive, maintaining my brain, and I'm sure you are too. But it's going to slip. And the second half of our life, we are, we have less cognitive power. We have less physical energy. Our processing speed is slower. Our working memory is weaker. Our memories are shittier. And that's just reality. Our wisdom, though, can go up. And this is where a lot of people struggle, is they don't transition from the productivity mode of your 20s and 30s to, and then maybe when you hit 50 or so, this is when you should switch, because if you're still grinding and you're still hustling, you're probably going to hustle till you fucking die. And so you need to switch to, now I'm passing on wisdom mode, teaching mode. This interesting. I saw Frank Zane, the bodybuilder. There was a couple of YouTube videos I was watching the last couple of nights. I knew who he was. I didn't really follow him. He's before my time, but he beat supposedly Arnold Schwarzenegger a few times in a couple of competitions, and he's all about aesthetics. And he's about 80 years old, 79 years old, something like this now. And it was just interesting to see him. There's something about him that I thought was really appealing. He does basically, he said the exact same thing I'm saying right now. He's basically converted to, first of all, physically maintenance. He's trying not to lose. He's not big muscular at this point in his life, but he's trying not to just lose strength, etc. He's trying to maintain his health, not to get any better. He's just trying to, fight against aging. But he is moved into a passing along wisdom phase where he's training bodybuilders and writing books and things like this, trying to get his knowledge out there. And I think that's important for a lot of us to know is, mentoring, that's another way of doing this, or you mentor people. Of course, you grow and learn as you mentor, but the raw cognitive power, our energy levels are not going to stay like they were when we're 25, like taking all-nighters, having no problem with that, working 12, 14 hours a day, having no issues. The reality is this stuff catches up to you. And it's around 35 to 45, usually, or 35 to 50, where your body sends you the rude messages for that lifestyle of hustling. You start to get high blood pressure, even though you work out, you start to get all sorts of, you get sick easily, your sleep sucks. All these are markers of chronic daily stress that's been going on for a long time, with basically all gas pedal, no brake.
Interesting. Yeah. So good things to watch out for. And it's kind of interesting when people, it's funny, Chris, when you're saying this too, so many people in the fat loss, with the fat loss thing, it's like, oh, it's my hormones, I've gotten older. It's like, and it's none of those things. Most of the time, it's a stress issue. They're not sleeping as well and more stress. So therefore more hedonic eating. And usually if you're making those bad choices to begin with, that means you're even eating more calories than you realize. And then you're not moving as much, but since you don't have any idea how many steps you're taking, you think it's just that. And your workouts they may feel hard, but if we tracked your performance on paper, you're not actually performing better. And that's why it feels harder. You're actually going backwards, trying to do something that maybe worked in the past, but it's not working for you now. And so much of it is just this psychological, like helping people get clear on what's happening and getting them away from some of the, it's not excuses, it's some of the reasons that have been promoted on social media for people, but it's like, you gotta switch gears. And in a lot of times, the reason they feel the way they do is because that lifestyle that they've been living up until they're, where they're in their 40s or 50s, which are where I think all of my clients, or almost all of my clients are. It's like that's catching up with them, and like, what do you do about it?
Well, I like that, because one of the big things I see, and I went, balls to the wall with this with YouTube. I think I'm at video 15 or 16, specifically only on sleep, because I thought I'd make 3 videos on the 3 major, first of all, the 3 major causes of poor sleep, which is circadian rhythm disruption, physiological overactivation, and then physiological activation and cognitive overactivation, which is can't turn my mind off. And I think I have about 4 more videos. I film them all, and I'm slowly just releasing them as I edit them. I think there'll be 20 or so in total, because if you want to accelerate your aging, if you want to kill your performance, I know everyone knows this. If you don't sleep well, it's cliche at this point to say this, but it is unbelievably true that this is an issue. And what I try to do with those videos was really I'm not just talking about basic sleep hygiene, it's stuff like, and looking at some of the research and giving that information out from what you can do and first of all, what all the bad things that can happen from psychologically, from stress, cognitively, excess cortisol. Excess cortisol is bad for your hippocampus. Hippocampus is important for memory formation, and it's basically toxic for your hippocampus. Hippocampi, there's two of them. And the lymphatic system. So this is, when your brain cleans itself overnight. So these sorts of things are super important. And I go over all the medications we take for sleep and how they have now been shown to actually cause potential Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia as you get older, like anticholinergics and these medications. Like, I don't name brands, but things that are used for nausea, for allergies, and sleep medications. Things like amitriptyline, other things. And I go over how these are serious problems. You're taking them to help you sleep. It's giving you not real sleep, it's giving you sedation, not sleep, proper sleep architecture.
Sedation, not
but this
sleep,
is the thing.
Right?
Yeah, it's more exactly. You feel like, I feel like I slept. But and I go over everything from alcohol to marijuana to magnesium, to ashwagandha, to blue blocking glasses, to Flux or Flux, to Iris. Oh, I don't think I mentioned Iris. It's like Flux, the computer program that blocks out blue light. To breathing, that, like I told you earlier, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And the latest videos that I'm just releasing now are cognitive overactivation, where people can't turn their mind off. And how do you deal with that? And the number one thing, if you want to age and perform at your best, you need to basically prioritize your sleep. And one thing I mentioned is the use of melatonin. It's sold over the counter like it's fucking candy. It's a powerful hormone, and the doses that are sold in the stores, like 3 to 5 to 10 milligrams, are like 10 times more than the pineal gland actually produces. The pineal gland is actually at the base of the brain, it's below the brain. And if you're going to take melatonin, and I say this in any supplement, I would never take the same supplement every single night, because of our physiology. Our physiology becomes adaptive, just like you get addicted to nicotine and alcohol and weed, all these things. Weed's got you still develop tolerance, which is a form of that. And what happens is you take melatonin because the number one, the pineal gland is the organ in the body that calcifies, I call it turning to rock, the most in the body as we age. And I show pictures of what happens as like I show a 14-year-old and I think like a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old, something like this. And it's like normal and like all white because it's calcified. And we don't want to accelerate that process by taking supplemental melatonin.
Proven, or is that something that you're just concerned about? Is there data on that?
Yes and no. So it's not 100% proven yet, but I do know that every physiological system pretty much works that way. You take testosterone,
feedback loop.
That's right. Your balls stop producing testosterone. And you can, like most bodybuilders or people have done this, they know that they're going to have to potentially, if they take it long enough, they'll have to take TRT for the rest of their life, testosterone replacement therapy. So there was a couple of articles that suggested they didn't think that was going to happen with melatonin. But all I can say is, do you want to take that risk?
Right.
That's what I say. I'm not against melatonin. I even say in the videos on Sunday nights, I'll take 300 micrograms. So 10 times weaker than the 3 milligram pills you get. You can get these, they're hard to find, under my tongue. And sometimes I have a slow release version that I would take that will basically, you only should, in my opinion, use it for setting your circadian clock because of jet lag or because of weekends, or just maybe once or twice a week. I don't like the idea of taking this hormone that our brain and our body naturally produces. Your brain will stop producing it, no doubt. Does it come back? I don't think there's a single study that showed if you use melatonin 5 to 10 milligrams or whatever the people are taking these days for 2 years every single day, how long does it take for your brain your pineal gland to work again? But again, it calcifies. But I will say, you cannot stop the calcification as far as we know. So what we know is save the melatonin until you're 60 years old, when your pineal gland is a fucking rock and you don't have a choice.
Right.
And you want to try and sleep normally. So like this is the thing. Young people are taking this as if it's nothing. And I could be wrong. Like it's perfectly fine. The pineal gland bounces back. But,
right now it's a crapshoot. right now. It's the roll of the dice.
That's
One
right.
thing I'll say too about this, as someone who's maybe overused melatonin in terms of frequency, like I take about 500 milligrams, I bite the pills in half, but and get the 1 milligram. I mean, 1 milligram, and then bite it in half and take the 500 micrograms.
Right.
But it's like, why do you need something to sleep in the first place? And for me, what I figured out was, I like in this place that I'm in right now, I'm in Brazil. And also I had this experience in Portugal. Actually, I'll use the Portugal example. I flew to Portugal from Miami. No, I'm sorry. Actually, from San Antonio. So there was like a 7-hour time difference.
Wow.
Big time difference for your circadian rhythm to kind of get a hold of. But I crushed my jet lag quickly. I used caffeine. I did use melatonin, but the most important thing was that when I got to Portugal, the place I'm staying at had these shutters that completely blocked out light.
Oh, nice.
And I was able to fall asleep on schedule. Like, I forced myself to stay up, and fall asleep at the time in Portugal. Slept like a baby. Yeah, I felt bad because I didn't, I went 24 hours without sleep to get to that point. Couldn't sleep on the plane, but I was able to bounce back quickly because of that. And then I went back to the States, then went back to Portugal again. And then I ended up at a place that didn't have these blinds. In fact, the days right now are super long in Portugal.
Yeah.
14 hours or 6. It gets light at 6 and then gets dark at 9. Right. So 12, you do the math. But it's a long time. Hours, 15 hours of light. 16. And so 16 hours of light. And man, it was just, I got sick in 2 days from that. Of course, was I exposed to viruses, but I wasn't exposed to something on the way the first time. Anyway, it completely...
of course you are. You're always exposed. Your body's always fighting those things.
Exactly. And the fast way to catch something is to have some really shitty sleep. So now I will not stay in a place without blackout blinds. And and I sleep like a baby, don't need melatonin. Quiet, dark, and cool. And I think people sometimes don't, and certainly if you're struggling with sleep right now, you got to check out Chris's videos. If you're at all interested in what he's saying and taking your sleep knowledge. I mean, Chris, you're a wealth of information. Don't know why you're not, well, actually I do know why you're not as popular as Huberman. It's called marketing. But, you're like, who that is, by the way? Andrew?
I do,
yeah. So
he's a smart guy, very detailed podcasts. Very more than, of course, difference is he's a neuroscience researcher. We do the same things, right? To train, to become a neuropsychologist or a clinical psychologist, you still have to do the exact same PhDs.
He just doesn't work with people is the problem.
That's right. You just have to spend an extra 2 years. And in between all that, instead of, partying or whatever you would do, you have to see patients and learn and do all these clinical courses. Not to say that he's a very smart guy. He knows a lot of
says
stuff,
a lot of wrong
especially when
stuff.
it comes to, no, I think what he says is mostly, accurate. He knows a lot about neurotransmitters. The issues are, like, for example, serotonin. There's like at least 12 receptors and different things that serotonin does. There's people coming out with questionnaires like, are you serotonin dominant?
Sure, I saw the Braverman test, and there's a bunch of tests
stuff like that. This. It's mostly bullshit, first of all. If it helps you to think that way, sure, right? Like dopamine makes you, wanting to pursue potentially pleasurable things or rewarding things. And that's generally true, but it's not like true that if you give someone medications like Wellbutrin that increases dopamine, that you'll automatically do that. You'll see it in real people. It doesn't happen that way. We're way more complex. Not to say what he's saying we're not complex enough, but I'm just saying generally we are very complex. And this is why, like my book, my Achieve, the book, it was all about finding out your personality and your values and your goals and really getting to know yourself. And this stuff in my videos and my latest way of really conceptualizing things is basically trying to understand yourself at least on 3 levels, which is your physiology, your psychology, and your neurology, and understanding yourself on those 3 levels and then hacking your system on those 3 levels, if you want to call it that. This is the key to success. So when I work with clients and patients, I work always on those three levels. I don't, like a typical normal clinical psychologist, will work on the psychological level, which is what you're trained to do. But this is why we do things like neurofeedback. Supplements can change your neurology, right? Your sleep. You need to attack your sleep problems. Besides the three major causes, like I said, circadian rhythm disruption, which most people have, by the way. People think it's just jet lag. It's actually, if you're not going to bed and waking up at the same time every night, if you're getting exposed to blue light and light at night, or you're not getting exposed to bright light in the mornings, preferably sunlight or a light box, your circadian rhythm is disrupted. Physiological activation, which is like eating too close to bed, or exercising too close to bed, getting angry too close to bed, doing work email and feeling physiologically activated, watching scary movies too close to bed. All these things cause physiological activation. Caffeine too late in the day. All these things cause that. And then cognitive overactivation, which again is you can't stop thinking. And usually it's a combination of those. This is not including clinical disorders like sleep apnea. But then looking at it again from the psychological side, like what are the psychological strategies to deal with this? What are the neurological strategies? And what are the physiological ones? Like for example, the breathing 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, like I said, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which puts the brake on that physiological overactivation. This is why I do this every night for about 30 to 60 minutes as I'm on watching YouTube or doing emails around 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock. I have Cardia Deep Breathing, the app on here, Cardia with a K.
You have me use that.
And I'm doing that because it's been shown to do all these great things, like I've said. And so it also calms me down for sleep. So you need to, sleep is actually quite complicated. And you have to understand not just sleep, but this is peak performance, your physiology, your psychology, and your neurology, if you want to perform at your best.
Yeah. Well, Chris, that was a clinic on understanding high performance and really the blocks, specifically the blocks to high performance. And a lot of us think it's one thing, but it's actually more of what you talked about today. I would love to have you back on sooner rather than later to maybe talk about like how do we boost, cognition? What are the things, certainly sleep, and someone couldn't go to your YouTube channel, watch those things, but maybe dig into how to be more, how to boost that, how to boost our cognitive function, especially as we're getting older. Like you mentioned, there's going to be some natural decline as there is in our musculoskeletal system. So listen, if you are blown away by Chris, which, come on, I like Huberman, but the guy says a lot of wrong, incorrect things. I can't speak with regards to what you mentioned, Chris, but with some of the sauna stuff, there's a lot of confounding variables there. But I know you, and I know that you're super on point with what you'll say. And so if you're looking for someone kind of like Andrew, but is a little bit more on the clinical side, has worked with a lot of people, and also understands all those things that you hear about on Huberman's podcast. Go check out Chris. I've known him for years, in case this is your first time hearing him. And you can go to drchrisfriesen.com, and that's drchrisfriesen.com. And you can find him also on YouTube. And the links for both of those will be on the show notes for this episode. Chris, man, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure catching up. And I'm serious. We gotta do this sooner rather than later. Maybe even have you in. We gotta talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's been a pleasure. Can't wait to do it again.
Me too.
That's it for today, my friend. I hope you learned a lot from my conversation with Dr. Chris Friesen. There are so many things that we could dive into with him. I know that I have to have him back on soon. Until then, we're going to meet again on Friday for another Real Talk conversation. This time, I'm going to talk about the 5 ways to control hunger and cravings. When I first started in this business, I thought it was carbs or chemicals or hormones that caused people to struggle to lose fat. Fast forward till now, 23 years later, where I'm getting consistently great results with my clients like never before. And I'll tell you, it has to do with managing hunger and cravings. So if you're struggling with that right now, episode on Friday is going to change everything for you. Tune in then and find out what I'm talking about. Hope you have a great week. and speak to you on Friday. Thank you again for listening to the Legendary Life Podcast. We have some amazing episodes coming your way, so make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're already subscribed and today's episode hit home for you, please share this episode with someone who you know would benefit from listening. Take care and see you every Monday and Friday in your favorite podcast app.